Nostalgia! If you're a fan of the original Resident Evil 4 and you are critical of the changes made to Remake 4, the reason for your complaints is I understand. Reading through the comment section of my video is because you are blinded by nostalgia. That is the only fathomable reason why you would prefer the design of the original game and why you would be critical of the remake. It's not possible that the design of the original game is just better than the remake. No. The reason for this is just because you can't get over your childhood connection to your GameCube or whatever. Of course, I don't believe that, and I think I did a good job in my original review of going over what exactly I had a problem with in terms of the changes in game design. And so since doing that review, I've decided, well, why don't I go through and review the rest of the series, at least going up to 6, and sort of tracking the changes and evolution of the gameplay, just because I thought it'd be interesting to compare with what I love so much in Resident Evil 4. And so as I'm working on this review for Resident Evil 5, there is a monologue in the back of my mind that just cannot help but compare the changes that Resident Evil 5 made versus the changes that Remake 4 made. Because if you think about it, these two games, Resident Evil 5 and Remake 4, they are sort of like siblings because they are both asking the same question. They are both wondering, how do we live up to the legacy of Resident Evil 4? Where do you go from Resident Evil 4? And it's so fascinating to see these two different approaches where on one hand you have the traditional approach of the past, which is, okay, let's take the ideas, concepts, and design philosophy of Resident Evil 4 and expand upon it and hopefully improve some elements of it in a sequel, in a new game, in a different game. So Resident Evil 4 was one game, now we're gonna make a different game but with similar design, and we'll call this game Resident Evil 5. Versus the meta of game design now, where Capcom grabs a hold of the original IP of Resident Evil 4, gets out a scalpel and just scrapes off the skin of Resident Evil 4 and then grafts it on to a brand new game, like that scene in Face Off where they take John Travolta's face and they put it on Nicolas Cage. That is how game design is now. They just take the IP, the aesthetics, the branding of Resident Evil 4, and then they graft it on this lame Last of Us style ripoff with parries and stealth sections, and there we go. We did it. We remade the game, and everyone is happier for it, right? And so what I'll be doing in today's review is comparing and contrasting these two approaches and explaining why, in my opinion, Resident Evil 5 owns Remake 4. And so let's begin with an interesting topic. Why don't we start off by discussing what I think are the main weaknesses of the original Resident Evil 4, because even though it is by far my favorite game in the series and I think the best game in the series in overall quality, that doesn't mean it's perfect. And so let's talk about these weaknesses and see if Remake or Resi 5 address them in any way. Let's start with what I think is the biggest weakness of Resident Evil 4, the menu and weapon system. In that, when you're playing the game, if you want to change weapons, you have to open up the inventory menu and pause the action to switch from a pistol to a shotgun, or a shotgun to a rifle, or a rifle to a gun. So when it comes to the action element of the gameplay, which I highly value and think is the best part of Resident Evil 4, it is constantly being interrupted all the time with this menu that you have to open. It's functional, it works, it doesn't cause problems, but what it does is it slows down the pace of the gameplay. And it also kind of adds in this sort of half-time combat element too, where let's say a guy's coming at you with a chainsaw and you need to switch over to the shotgun. You open the menu, you look at your shotgun and you see it's out of ammo, and you can sit there and take them out and be like, okay, so the shotgun's out of ammo. Maybe I should use the rifle? Or maybe I should just unpause and turn and run. So it has this sort of pausing element that allows you to sit and strategize over what you're going to do. And so the problem with this is it allows the player to bypass one of the fundamental tests of action games, which is on the fly knowledge of your resources. Think of a FPS. Think if you're playing Call of Duty online and every time you need to switch or reload, you can pause the game and think about it. It just cuts down on that real-time element. And so both Resident Evil 4 Remake and Resident Evil 5 have sort of addressed this concern, kind of. Now, Resident Evil 5 goes all the way. Resident Evil 5 is like, you know what? You better know if your shotgun has ammo or not. You better know if your machine gun has ammo or not. Because there's no pausing, there's no stopping. If you open that menu and you go to select the shotgun and you see that it's empty, your head's getting cut off by a chainsaw. And so it is much more aggressive and demanding in terms of inventory and item switching than the original Resident Evil 4. And in my opinion, I really love this change. I think this is an outright improvement. Yes, we are going in the right direction, Capcom. Because the menu of Resident Evil 5, let's just get into it. Let's just talk about it right now. The menuing of Resident Evil 5 is the strongest gameplay innovation of the game and is better than the menu of Resident Evil 4 for a number of reasons. The first reason, like I said, is that now it's becoming a real-time action combat element. But the other thing is that it introduces a secret technique that I think a lot of you probably are not aware of, which is the ability to menu reload. This is like a really important mechanic. This mechanic is the equivalent of learning to do Royal Guard cancels in Devil May Cry, or learning how to do jump cancels in Devil May Cry. This mechanic is pivotal, and it completely shifts the combat and style of Resident Evil 5 in a really, really cool way. And it integrates in with the beat 'em up elements amazingly well. If we were to modify Resident Evil 4, if we were to remake Resident Evil 4 in a proper sense, this menu would be an amazing addition to the game, because what it allows you to do, not to get too technical, is you can start buffering in reloads during other actions. So let's say you've got your pistol, you headshot a zombie, the zombie's in the stagger state, and you run up to do the roundhouse kick or some kind of melee combat kick. In Resident Evil 4, of course, this is legendary and amazing, and one of my favorite things about the original Resident Evil 4 is how powerful and mighty the hitboxes on these moves are. Sends people launching in the air and everything. They really nerfed that in the remake, which I had a big problem with. But Resi 5, not only can you do that, but while you're roundhouse kicking, if you pop open the menu, you can menu reload your guns during the roundhouse. So it creates this beautiful symmetry between the gunplay and the melee that's not in 4, and it's certainly not in the remake. And it is incredible. The easiest comparison is style switching in Devil May Cry. I know you all love style switching, right? And it creates these possibilities that you just cannot do in Resident Evil 4. And so the menu in so many ways in Resident Evil 5 is such a strong step forward. And this is one of the biggest flaws of Resident Evil 4, is now one of the biggest strengths of Resident Evil 5. So that is an amazing change. And if you've been playing Resident Evil 5 all these years and you are not menu reloading your weapons and using the menus on the fly and buffering it during actions, you need to take a second look at this game, because basically you've been playing Ninja Gaiden without guard buffering, and you've been playing Devil May Cry without Royal Guard cancels and jump cancels. It is that fundamental. So they fixed this. They improved this in 5 all those years ago. They figured it out way back when. But like I said in my review of Resident Evil 4 Remake, we are losing game design just as much as we are gaining. So we lost this whole concept of menu reloading and buffering reloads with the menu and stuff, which you can tell is totally intentional, because even if they didn't put it in initially on purpose, over all the revisions of Resident Evil 5, which have been many, and they've done all kinds of changes and they've removed QTEs and everything, if Capcom did not want this mechanic in the game, they would have removed it in this process somewhere. If it was in the original, they would have removed it in gold, right? But they kept it. And there's thousands of replays of people doing this. Capcom are fully aware of it. This is an intended part of the game, and it's beautiful. In Resident Evil 4 Remake, they take a step back. They throw away this innovation of the real-time menu and go back to the old school Resident Evil 4 pausing menu. And I know what you're saying, I know what you're typing. Wait, no. There is on-the-fly weapon switching in Remake. Sort of, but not really. Because for one, you can just not use it, right? So the guy's coming at you with the chainsaw, you're like, oh shit. You can still, like you could in Resident Evil 4, pop open that menu, look and see, oh, I've got shotgun shells, let me switch to my shotgun, and switch to the shotgun. So they are not forcing the real-time combat menu like they were in 5. And then on top of that, sure, you can use the little D-pad to switch the weapons, but you can't menu reload. It's like a half step, where Remake 4 is taking a step back from 5. And the funny thing is that the developers seem to be kind of aware of this to some degree, because they put an auto sort option in. They're like, hey, this menu is kind of antiquated and a holdover from 4. We all see that. So we're gonna give you an auto sort, but we're not gonna like full on revamp the menu like they did in 5. And I know a lot of people will come to Remake 4's defense and say, oh no, but see, it's a remake. So they're wanting to pay tribute to the original game's crappy, clunky menu. But then why make the remake? Isn't the remake supposed to be improving the game? Isn't that the whole point of remaking it, is to be improving it? Yeah, maybe it's a step forward from Resi 4, but it's clearly a step back from Resi 5. So that would be the first weakness of Resident Evil 4 that both of them have addressed, and I think clearly Resi 5 did a much better job. One of the other things about the menu system that sucks in Resident Evil 4 is, let's say you're done with the combat, right? And you've used your pistol, you've used your shotgun, you've used your rifle, and you need to reload all your guns. Well, sadly, in the original Resident Evil 4, you have to literally swap to gun to gun to gun, reload, 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 reload them all manually for the next encounter. You're gonna have to do that as well in Remake 4, whereas 5, you just pop open that menu, and in about 3 seconds, you've loaded all of your guns and you're ready for the next encounter. So it cuts down on that downtime that doesn't need to be there. Downtime, no. Resident Evil 5 is getting rid of it, and I'm a big fan of that, so that is a great improvement to Resi 5 all around. The menu system is beautiful. I love how weapons don't have bigger inventory and you have to buy bigger cases like a stupid RPG. I love how it's built into the game, built-in slots. You give the slots to your partner, they can help you carry stuff. It's beautiful. I love the way it works. So let's get to the second flaw of the original Resident Evil 4, which is the map system. This isn't as big of a deal, but I wanted to point this out here because it's kind of menu related. So one of the biggest pet peeves I have of the original Resident Evil 4, even though I've almost basically memorized the game, is every now and again you kind of lose track of where you're supposed to go. And so then you have to pause what you're doing, you open the map, you're like, okay, where do I go here? Close the map. Resident Evil 5 was like, forget this whole pausing the map, waiting to do things kind of thing. It adds in a little real-time map up in the top. That is awesome. I love it, because one of my least favorite things in action games is this whole, where do we go? What do we do? So having the map in real time you can go through and it guides you, that's awesome, right? Another great innovation introduced in Resi 5 that Remake 4 just kind of drops. So it goes back to the old school map system of Resident Evil 4 of like, okay, you have to pause the menu, you have to look at where you're going, especially that stupid section where you have to get in the boat and drive around the boat. I mean, that's lame. You're going, then you have to constantly pause the map, look, okay, where am I here? Close the map. It's slowing down the pace. It's cutting the pace. And Resident Evil, at least the action ones, it's all about the pace.
My insane pace. My insane pace. Look at that. See how fast my pace is? Yeah, baby. Do this.
And Resi 5, you don't have to do that. The menu is real time. It's really nice, clean, guides you where you need to go. So again, that's another innovation that 5 came up with, that Remake 4 just drops, and their brilliant idea is, okay, instead of using this real type map to navigate, that's so 2007, instead, why don't we literally paint lines in the level that the players can follow? Even though it looks absolutely absurd, the CIA came in and they spray painted for Leon where he needs to go, so you can just follow the yellow paint, follow the yellow brick road, right? That way the players can't miss it. I hate this solution. Now, I don't really care that much about the story elements and all that. I just think it looks really stupid. And also, you can't get rid of it. Where, let's say you play Resident Evil 5 enough where you know where to go, you can just not open the map and you can just play with the map off. But in Remake 4, that yellow paint is here to stay. Even if you know where to go, you're gonna be following along the yellow paint. It's such a crude, stupid solution to something that was already solved in Resident Evil 5. And then let's go to the third flaw of Resident Evil 4, and this is an important one: difficulty. Resident Evil 4, I hate to say, as much as I love the game, and as much as I played on professional mode, and as much as I think it's cool that it has like a rank system and everything, it is a bit too easy. It is a little bit on the easy side. Now, it isn't so easy that you can't replay it and enjoy it, and it's a big knock against the game. But I think that Resident Evil 4 could have definitely have had like an extra professional mode, super professional or something, to take it to the next level. And the thing that I would like to see Resident Evil 4 do to make it more difficult is important to discuss, because not all difficulty design is equal. It's important to properly make higher difficulty, because just making a game harder doesn't make it work. You have to make it harder in the correct way. So in my opinion, what they should have done with Resident Evil 4 to make it harder, if you had like a special professional mode, you'd add in more enemies, you'd become a little bit stingier with the ammo. That way the players have to start using the beat 'em up elements more, like knee shots into roundhouses, into knifing them on the ground. And then on top of that, maybe add in some more gnarly enemy combinations, so you're having to deal with multiple enemy types at once, rather than being able to like herd a bunch of melee zombies easily in an area, stuff like that. So I think those changes would be a great way to add in more difficulty to Resident Evil 4. And guess what? That is exactly what Resident Evil 5 does. Resident Evil 5 is hard as balls. It is way harder than Resident Evil 4. And for the most part, it does it correctly. Not totally, but it has the right idea at least. So what Resident Evil 5 does is it adds in more enemies. It gives the enemies a lot more aggressive AI. So they are coming at you, they move faster, they swing harder. The levels are actually a little bit more constrained too. So you can't just circle around them all that much. You gotta really fight your way out of corners and fight your way for every bit of space. And that works really well. The one error that I think Resident Evil 5 makes though is it does make the enemies, at least initially, a tad too tanky. That's pretty much it. I think the HP in the earlier bits of the game could be cooled down a bit and instead have more swarming. And also I think the tracking on the enemies at times is a little much. It's not egregious, okay? It's not Remake egregious where they're like football players blitzing you and tackling you from across the screen, and really your only option is to duck their grab or parry. You're not able to move around them. In 5, you're still able to maneuver and move around them. It's just tighter. But the thing that Resi 5 really adds that, again, is a step forward from Resi 4 is one, enemy variety. There's a lot more types of enemies coming at you at 5. And I think they blend together in really great ways, especially with the partner dynamic, which we'll talk about a little bit later. And then another thing I really like is how evasive the new AI is in Resi 5. So one thing about Resi 4 is when you get really good at 4, you can kind of sit back and just headshot your way through a lot of the game. Headshotting in Resi 4 is very reliable and very strong. And yes, the zombies do sort of sidestep it and duck it a little bit, but for the most part, that's easy to track and keep a hold of. So if you get really good at the game and predicting the enemy AI, you're just getting headshots all day. These motherfuckers in Resi 5 though, they are evasive sons of bitches. One of the funniest examples of this is there's the tribesmen zombies. They will straight up limbo under headshots. They will limbo down in crazy ways. It's really fun, not only because it starts to create this sort of dynamic of risk reward where if you need to get the kill quick, you go for body shots, but that uses resources. Whereas if you're really confident, you go for the headshot, but it's more risky. You kind of have to point blank a lot of headshots more. You have to get your gun right on their head so you can get the headshot. I really like all that stuff. I really like how evasive and tricky the new AI is. I think that's a smart way to make the game more difficult versus Remake 4. So for one, I don't think Remake 4 is that much more difficult than the original Resident Evil 4. Maybe slightly, but not really that much, especially compared to freaking 5 in terms of difficulty. There's no competition there. So what 4 does in terms of difficulty is, of course, it makes the enemies more tanky, gives them a lot less hits done. It makes getting stuns off of them a much less reliable strategy, and so they become these more bullet spongy type enemies. And then to deal with that, all you have to do, this is like the downfall of most third-person action games, I'm looking at you, Armored Core 6, is the good old circle strafe. Yep. So if you're thinking Resident Evil 4 Remake is tough, start circle strafing, because you can do that in Remake 4, but you can't do that in OG 4 or Resi 5, because you can't shoot and move in those games. Where in Remake, you can shoot and move and circle strafe like every other third-person shooter, and then on top of that, you have a parry. So you're circle strafing, you can duck the grabs, and then if the enemies get really aggressive and throw something at you, you can just parry it. And if they go to hit you with a pitchfork, just parry it. So it creates this very formulaic, reliable strategy. And if you watch all the Mercenaries modes runs, all the guys are doing this because it's too good not to do. You just circle strafe, headshot while aiming, and then when things come at you, just parry it. You know, it's not rocket science. There's not positioning and frames and hit stun and all that kind of stuff. So again, there, Resident Evil 5 mostly doing it right, and Remake 4 taking a step back from the original. So with all this praise and love for Resident Evil 5, it kind of sounds like I like it better than the original 4. And in some aspects, and in some ways, I do think it is better than 4 with certain design decisions, like the menu and all that. But it also has some flaws and takes some steps back from 4. So that's what I'm going to talk about next. The first issue with Resident Evil 5 that, of course, everyone's going to acknowledge this and talk about this is the partner system of the campaign. Now, when you're doing co-op, from what I understand, this system is like awesome. This is like the coolest game ever and probably one of the best co-op games ever. However, most of us are going to be playing the game single player, and I think it's very important to have a very solid single player experience. So I think Capcom with the campaign should have done a little bit more for the single player version of it to make it more reliable and solid. That being said, I think people are overcritical about the AI partner of Resident Evil 5. I know when I was getting ready to do the review and talking about the game, most people were saying, oh God, you know, prepare to suffer when it comes to the main campaign because of the AI partner. And so I think the AI partner is much more solid than people give it credit for, but it certainly has its problems. And so it doesn't break the campaign if you start to strategize what you're going to do with the AI. One tip that I have is keep the AI close to you, like physically stay close to that AI, keep that AI next to you, because when the AI is with you, it actually can be pretty damn useful. One, you can give your healing items to the AI, so the AI on the fly can keep healing you, and it's pretty smart about knowing when to heal you and when not to heal you, and that will save you trouble and time, because unlike Resident Evil 4 and Resident Evil 5, healing is not done in a menu. So in Resi 4, you can pause the menu, you can go in and just heal to your heart's content, safe inside the menu. In Resi 5, you gotta pull out the thing and actually use it and use the frames of healing, which if you're backed into a corner, you got 6 enemies on top of you, that's a big risk. So I think one idea with the AI partner was, okay, we'll have the AI partner stay close to you and they'll heal you while you're fighting and keep you safe. So that is one strong use of the AI partner, is think of them like a medic. Keep giving them your health items. Another strength of the AI partner is that they can break throws. So when you're getting backed into the corner and you have a bunch of enemies on top of you, if you have your AI partner next to you, you don't really need to worry too much about the guys without weapons. Just focus on the guys with weapons, because if you get grabbed, your AI partner can like instantly break the grab for you. So they're really useful for breaking grabs and healing. And if you give them a weapon, they will certainly sharpshoot the shit out of things. The only problem is they're kind of indiscriminate and they kind of waste ammo. But in a pinch, they definitely can be handy. And of course, their main strength, the main purpose of their existence is that they are secondary walking inventory. So if you find items and you don't have room for them or you don't need them for combat, you can hand them to the AI, extra ammo that they don't have a weapon for. They can help carry stuff for you. And that's kind of where it ends in terms of the AI being useful. And then there's all the problems the AI creates. And let's be real here, it's a lot, right? So one thing is the AI just goes rogue. This is something they really could have fixed. If they patched the game, they could still fix it now, which is like, so you have the different commands. One of them's like cover, one's them attack. Why don't they have it, a setting for the AI where the AI will always stay close to you? Like that could be one of its main sort of operations, is you tell them stay close and they will just stick right to you. That was a strength of Ashley in Resi 4 actually, and why I think as obnoxious as Ashley can be in Resi 4, especially if you shoot her in the head on the accident or you stab her in the throat on accident. I've done that many times. I think she is actually a superior AI to the AI in 5 because she knows her place. She knows, okay, I'm gonna stay by your side, I'm gonna stick close to you, and you can kind of treat her like when you tow a trailer in real life, where if you're towing something, you just need to take really wide turns and be a little bit slower and it'll be okay. That's Ashley in 4. You just take wide turns, slow it down a tiny bit, and you can keep her close to you and safe, and then you can tell her to go hide places. So she's a much superior AI because in 5, whether it's Sheva or Chris, you can flip it either way, your AI partner just, they go rogue in places where they shouldn't, and then they don't do things that you want them to do. Like, for example, crates, breaking crates. Why don't they have an operation to go break crates and select items? You still have to break the crates for them. I think the reason why is because that would probably cause even more chaos and confusion. But I think if they were a bit more sophisticated, they could have made that make sense. Like, during non-combat encounters, the AI will go and break things. And then on top of that, the stupid, like, heal your partner mechanic. I get why they included that. And if you have a human being for a partner, it's a cool mechanic. It's a great mechanic because it makes the human beings coordinate and work together. I think that's a great mechanic. I think if it was in single player mode, this whole like your partner gets hurt, you need to go revive them, or you get hurt, your partner needs to come revive you. I think they should have removed that mechanic for solo mode, even if you have an AI partner, because it creates all these dumbass situations like your partner will jump out a window and so they get downed. You're like getting trapped in the corner. You can't get out the window to get them because like a zombie's standing in front of the window. So you literally can't jump out of it and then they die. Or the reverse, where you are getting separated and your partner's like stuck on 16 zombies and you're just down and out. It just creates way too much chaos. I think if they removed that mechanic and just gave you like normal health bars, I think that would have been much better. That is one of the big weaknesses of Resi 5's campaign, no doubt about it. Another thing they could have done if you're playing solo is simply have sections where there's no AI, right? Like just have more sections where if it's not co-op, the AI goes away and you're just solo moding it. Like you do in Resi 4. Resi 4 struck that balance much better. Where imagine if you had to play the entire game with Ashley. That would be a nightmare if you had to play the entire game with Ashley. They were smart in strategically placing Ashley in certain sections. They should have done the exact same thing in Resi 5. They should have sections with the AI and then sections without them. So when you start to get really annoyed by them, you at least have some breaks and breathers and without the stupid down mechanic and everything. And so the AI partner, everyone agrees, is the weakest part of Resident Evil 5. I don't think it's catastrophic though. And when it comes to playing the campaign, I'd much rather play Resident Evil 5's campaign with the obnoxious AI, but with all the great mechanics and great enemy design and level design versus freaking Remake 4 with gun sway, stealth sections, inertia, knife durability, weapon crafting. Nerfed stun and melee kicks, they just really degraded the core combat of Resident Evil 4 in a significant way. One thing that Resident Evil 5 does add though that I really like is on top of having the melee mechanics from 4, there's also a down attack. There's a downed attack whether you're stomping on them with Chris or you're shoving a knife into them with Sheva. That is a really cool mechanic, and it's a mechanic straight up out of beat 'em ups. That's a beat 'em up mechanic right there, and it's really cool. At first I was kind of like, what's the big deal? I mean, it's cute and everything, but might as well just knife them on the ground. But that was before I discovered menu reloading, because with menu reloading, oh my god, that mechanic is awesome, because what you can do, headshot, get them on the ground, stomp them, and then during the stomp, reload or weapon swap. So you can like pull out a grenade while you're stomping them and grenade people. You can reload your gun. You can reload like 2 guns if you're really fast, because you're able to buffer during the stomp. That's really cool. And the iframes, such a cool mechanic. I do wish though that when you stomp them is a little bit more visceral, like a proper curb stomp. But it would be great as if you stepped on the zombies and they exploded when you stomped on them. I mean, Sheva stabs them. I wish they would explode into blood when she stabs them, or you get more of a juicy animation on the stomps and stuff. Jill's slam is straight up out of DOA, and that one's pretty cool. The stomp moves are all pretty cool. I just wish the damage animations were a little bit more juicy. And then another weakness of Resident Evil 5 are the boss fights. They're just kind of, you know, they're not terrible or anything, but they're pretty underwhelming and lame and just not as iconic, you know, as the boss fights in 4. And you could say, oh, you know, I like the boss fights of Remake 4. Well, those are just crappier versions of the boss fights from 4. So I would still prefer 5's approach of like making new bosses in a new game rather than doing crappier versions of 4's bosses. But still, you know, that's a big weakness of 5 is the boss fights aren't all that compelling. And one thing about 5 though that's kind of funny is it's an improvement, but it's an improvement many years later where they removed the QTEs from 5. So I remember playing 5 back in the day and being like, this game and its QTEs, I'm gonna freaking stop, you know, like that is one thing about 5 that is really cool. Recently, they just removed the QTEs. There's a setting, you can go into game settings and like remove QTEs. That's such a great improvement. I'm hoping they're doing that with 6 as well. So 5 in the year 2023 is a big step forward in that regard, though traditionally it has the QTEs if you're playing on the Xbox or whatever. So play Gold on the newer systems so you don't have to deal with the QTEs. Another issue with 5 though compared to 4, and I think the main breaking point between the two, is that 5's level design just isn't as good as 4's. It's a little bit more convoluted and funky, and the environments kind of run into each other, and they're a little bit more obnoxious than in 4. 4's level design, to be fair, is insane. It's like one of the best in video games of all time. So following that up in 5 is a tall order, but they do fall short. 4's level design, like the campaign, is incredible. It really doesn't start to have issues, in my opinion, all the way until the end, until you get to like the island and you have the part where you have to move the mirrors. Up until that point though, 4's campaign and level design is just so rock solid and iconic and memorable, and it just works so many ways. All the sections flow so perfectly. It's introducing new enemies at a really good pace. Whereas 5 is a little bit more all over the place, where I like that it's bringing in new enemies, but it just kind of like throws them at you. Like, here's a new enemy, like here they come. Like there's a section in 5 where you're going through a dark cave and you can't see jack, and they decide, you know what would be great to put in here? Those giant bullet sponge exploding head enemies. Let's put a bunch of those in the section where you can't see where anything's happening and there's barely any ammo. Yeah, that'll be a good time. Or with the African tribesmen, really cool enemy type, but it just kind of springs the entire array of this enemy type on you all at once. Whereas with Resi 4, like with the Illuminati enemy guys, they kind of feed them in a bit at a time and you kind of get them meshed in there. Whereas with the tribesmen, it's just like, bam, new area, now you're fighting tribesmen, figure them all out all at once. So I think the pacing and level design of 5 is a step down from 4. And similarly, the hit stun and enemy animations of 5, I think, aren't as good as 4. So with 4, if you hit someone in the knee and get a knee stagger, or you hit them in the head and you get a head stagger, the animations for the zombies are really expressive and big and clear, and you know, okay, I can come in and do a context sensitive kick because he's in the reel, he's in the stun. 5 has these and you can get used to them, but I don't think they're as well telegraphed in 5, where you'll get kind of a stun on a zombie. The hit stun's there, but it's like a half stun, not a full stun, and that's fine, but I wish the game communicated that a little bit better, because there's so many times where you'll headshot a zombie or you'll get like a shoulder shot on a zombie and they'll kind of stun, and then you'll be like, wait, can I kick them now? Can I not? And then you run up just to find out that you can't, and then they grab you coming out of the stun. I think the actual balancing and frame data of the stuns and stuff in 5 is fine, but I think the animations should be much more clearly telegraphed. They're keeping a poker face. It's hard to know, am I getting the stun on you or not? And then there's different stun types, and how that works is a little bit less clear. So once you get really familiar with 5 and you start to play it and you start to recognize the little differences between the animations, this starts to go away. You can start to know, okay, no, that's not a full stagger, that's a half stagger, I get it. But when you're first playing 5, especially coming out of 4, I would say that's the big difference between the two, where 4 still retains the beat 'em up elements more than 5 does. 4 has legitimate like enemy grouping strategies, and you can group a bunch of enemies together, gang knife them with one slice. You know, it has that real final fight beat 'em up element to it. Whereas 5, because the enemies move faster, because they recover faster, because they have different stun states and things like that, you can still group them, but it's harder. It's starting to move away from a beat 'em up and more into a character action. I don't know how else to describe it. You know, it's moving a little bit more towards like Devil May Cry and a little bit away from Final Fight, I guess it would be the way to describe the combat in 5. But still though, compared to Remake 4, 5 feels incredible. It still feels like a really meaty action game, where Remake, it feels much more like a drunken, clunky shooter. And if you watch, you know, SS rank Mercenaries runs, this is supported because you just see them in aiming while moving, headshotting people. I mean, that's the meta of Remake 4. You're headshotting, you're shooting, you're moving, it's a shooter. Whereas the other games are much more God Hand style, Yakuza style beat 'em ups. And speaking of Mercenaries mode, no review of Resident Evil 5 is complete without discussing Mercenaries mode. There is no argument that Resident Evil 5's Mercenaries mode is incredible. It's amazing. It is easily the best part of the game, and Capcom knows it. And by God, they went so hard on Mercenaries mode. It's an arcade player's dream. I love Resident Evil 4 Mercenaries, but there is no question that Resident Evil 5 Mercenaries is just a tier above. From my understanding, it is the best Mercenaries mode in the entire series. And I know 6's Mercenaries mode is also legendary, but 5 is the god. 5 is the beast and good. And from my understanding, it is still played actively to this day, because the Mercenaries mode is so damn good. And so if you don't want to deal with the campaign, you don't want to deal with an AI partner who runs out and jumps out of windows and gets herself killed or himself killed, because I play as Sheva actually, no worries. So I still think it's really important for a Resident Evil game to have a really solid campaign, and for all its flaws with the AI partner, I still do think that the campaign of Resi 5 is solid and worth playing. But if there is a game where it is worth it to buy it just for the Mercenaries mode, Resident Evil 5 Gold is it. The Mercenaries mode of this game is so robust. It's incredible. And what makes the Mercenaries mode of 5 so much fun is just the fusion of all these elements, where you have the menu reloading, and then you have a combo system, and then you have the timers, and then you get time bonuses when you do melee attacks on enemies. So it's even rewarding you for using melee. So it's not just incentivizing you to shoot people and headshot them from a distance. It's actually saying, okay, no, headshotting them or kneecapping them and then hitting them with a melee gives you a time bonus, which equals more points. And then comboing. What you can do in this game is insane. One of my favorite strats that I've seen is when you kill enemies, they drop items, and the game gives you iframes, obviously, when you pick up the items. So what you can do is you can throw a grenade, and then as the grenade's exploding and killing everything around you, you can reach down and grab an item and use the iframes to survive the explosion of the grenade. You can't do that in 4 because everything's instantaneous in 4. The menus are instantaneous, the item pickups are instantaneous, which it works obviously and probably causes a little bit less issues than the real-time picking up items aspects of 5, but it also allows you to do crazy stuff like that. Just watch high-level replays of Resident Evil 5 Mercs and you'll see how much is going on here. It feels like an actual real arcade character action game. It feels just as complex and visceral as your Devil May Cry or as your Bayonetta, and it is legit and really well made, and people should take it a lot more seriously. And so, in conclusion, Resident Evil 5, it is a bold step forward from Resident Evil 4. Is it ultimately better than 4? No, because it does have some baggage dragging it back, some oversights, some issues. But over the years, they've really worked on this game a lot. The graphics are amazing. They look fantastic even now. Just side by side, maybe this is my own bias towards older style graphics, but just side by side, you put Remake 4 and a really souped up Resi 5 next to each other, I think Resi 5 looks better. Then of course, there's the characters, and Resi 5 has graced us, has blessed us with the beautiful biracial angel that is Sheva. If you're making a tier list of Capcom girls, my opinion, Sheva is number one. What an amazing character. And then Jill also looks fantastic. Even Chris in like his safari outfit looks pretty cool in like kind of a stupid douchey way. But if they remake 5, which they probably will at this point, I'm already in mourning for what they're going to do to poor Sheva's beautiful face, because you know they're going to ruin it with a bunch of crappy mocap. And then when everyone gets mad and it's like, you've ruined Sheva's face, they'll be like, Or they may not have Sheva in it at all if they relocate the game to Ireland or something and you have some redhead sidekick and poor Sheva is lost in the sands of time. So yeah, that's Resident Evil 5, easily my second favorite Resident Evil game at this point, and I think it absolutely obliterates Resident Evil 4 Remake, and it is kind of sad and pathetic that Resident Evil 4 Remake gets held in such high esteem, and poor Resi 5 does not get the credit that it deserves. Adios, everyone.
So thank you to the $5 patrons, 100, accepting Panda, Admiral Coconut, Anhold, Alexander Pfeiffer, Anthony A, Arcade Hell, Arrow Viper, Autoname, Beam Pit, Bo, Ben, Beetle Dames, Bog Hog, Borgie22, Chase Palumbo, Chris Yusufovich, Chronic Burnout 3, Clara Cliff, Climby Coyote, Coast, Colorboy, Cooksand666, Cook Some Soup, Krusty Boy, Des Audio, Dan Chi, Darren Griffin, Dave Hansen, David Crespo, Delta Tango 6, Dick Jones, Dingo, Disco Stas Leia, DJ420, Praise It, Dr. Bosky, Elias Alonso, Evan Serafet, FCK, F Deluxe, Friskin, Frames Per Human, Francisco, Full Set, Gameboy Guru, Geese Machine, GPM, Hausu, Jake Ryan, JLab, JBRPG, Jink Hans, John Kelly, George Sand, K, K2, K-Horse, Contain, Praise the Boys, Low Casting, Nyashpa, Malaise, Mars Bar, Matt O'Leary, Maz, Megadeth 859, Minung, Moonro, Nathaniel Davis, Neon Dagger Games, Okla Kugels, Pedro Perez, Psycho Blizzard, Queen Charlene, Rafael Trujillo, Raul, Real Skeen, Retro Schmupper, Riff Mason, Rolf015, Ryan Bartlett, Scanline City, Cisa FW, Shazzy, Shmup Junkie, Sarah Pong, Spiders STG, Steady AI, Steve Fiction, Street Magic, Super Funk, SW1335, Tamzarian, Takara Mucho, Taze Ryu, The Boot Rex, The Dirty Screech, The N1, The Old Bensta, Toho Rizardi, Tsugumo, 2YU, Twilight EX, Unicoi Roots, Ursua, Ushi Mushi, Vic Viper, Beautiful, Wabby Legs, Zachary Patton, and Zeal.